Downtown Wilmington has one of the most beautiful historic districts in North Carolina, and living in one of these homes can feel incredibly special. But historic ownership also comes with responsibilities that buyers need to understand before making the commitment. So what makes a historic home historic? Hey everyone, my name is Tabitha or Tabby Klein, the ILM Realtor, your local realtor here in Wilmington, North Carolina, helping you find your home between the river and the sea. Today we're diving into something that makes Wilmington really special, historic homes. Downtown Wilmington is full of beautiful character-filled houses, but buying one can be completely different and have a completely different set of rules than buying a newer home. Today's guest, Stephen Sulkey, has spent decades working with homeowners associations and has a deep understanding of historical preservation and what it actually takes to live in one of these homes full-time. So let's welcome Stephen to the podcast. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for coming into our slightly different podcasting space today. I hope it's comfortable and that you enjoy it.
It's very comfortable chair, actually.
Thank you. So, Stephen, you have a very unique view on Wilmington specifically, and then history even more so. So I would love to pick your brain about historic homes in Wilmington and what living in one kind of looks like. So, first things first, what makes a historic home in Wilmington historic?
Well, obviously, the major thing is age. You don't have a 2-year-old historic home. Generally speaking, when the 100-year mark is reached, that's typically the period you start thinking of a house as historic. But Wilmington, they do the placards on the houses. And if you drive around, there is actually a system. If you see a rust-colored placard, that is 75 years of age or older. A black placard, 100 or older. A gold placard, that's 150. And the much coveted blue placard, which is 200 plus years. So, I mean, you get a kind of a feel driving around, you have an idea about how old these structures are.
That's amazing. How many blue placards do you think there are in Wilmington?
Not very many.
Okay.
I don't really know the actual number, but you're probably talking less than 10. There's not that many buildings that have survived 200 years in this town. We've had incidents, you know, if you look at the old Sanborn insurance maps, at one time had some structure, but probably a fire claimed it. You go back in time, you're looking at, you know, wood-burning fireplaces, coal, gas, not the gas we use today, the natural gas, but coal gas. Yeah, a lot of fires, candles, lanterns, a lot of fires. You know, so a lot of buildings don't survive with time. Some are neglected, rotted, fell down, and some, unfortunately, were destroyed. That federal post office we have downtown, there was a beautiful structure that the government tore down to provide jobs to build the current structure. So it's like, unfortunately, the current structure is okay, but the original was much more beautiful as far as like a Victorian look.
Would that have been something that the Historic Preservation Committee would have had to sign off on, or is that just the city kind of doing eminent domain?
That was prior to any of this. At first, it was kind of very vague. It did not become, and this is an important fact, it is an actual zoning district. So when you buy a home there, you just can't willy-nilly do whatever you please. No, you've got to look at the regulations like any other zoned area, and you know that applies to the property.
We're going to dig into that in a little bit too, about exactly where some of the zoning lines can be found and what that means that you can do or not do to your property. What is the Historic Preservation Committee and what do they really regulate?
Historic Preservation Commission. So basically, North Carolina legislature passes these statutes, which applies to all policing, which I know it sounds weird, but this falls under that because zoning is basically property policing.
Yeah, because you just can't rip down a historic house and build a hotel and expect to get away with it.
Right. These regulations, no matter where you are in North Carolina, or basically any state, this statute comes along and says, how do you create a historic district? What are the parameters? And then how do you set up your commission? This is a volunteer position, no pay. Even city council gets some kind of a stipend. For people to take it on, they are volunteering their time, and it is difficult to get people to volunteer, put a lot of work into something where they don't get a penny.
Yeah. And it has to be a passion as well. Like you have to be passionate about history, passionate about your city, and have the time to give to it. So that's asking a lot out of people.
It is. I mean, and you also have to have some kind of a background for city council to appoint you. Now, my background was the HOA background. And of course, with HOA, you have ARC, Architectural Review Committees. So, there is something in my background, looking at properties and working with boards and doing things to say, yeah, well, this can be done or not done. Plus, I've had an actual active real estate broker's license since 1996. So I had the background in real estate. So
you're well-rounded for this role, is what I am hearing.
Hopefully I'm well-rounded.
Overqualified.
Yeah. Now, our basic duty is the congruity of a property as far as its appearance. So does the property look like it belongs in the historic district?
And some of that is keeping the integrity of the original structure intact, right? Like making sure that the historic property stays as close to its original historic
as possible. Now, we're also facing challenges too, for example, materials. By most of the zoning code, you have to replace in kind. So if you have wood, you're supposed to replace in kind with wood, which can be challenging because wood does rot. Now across the country, though, there's rethinking of a lot of that if we can have a modern material, fiber cement board, for example, that has the exact same dimensions and appearance as a wood board, use that instead. Because by the time it's installed on the siding of a house, for example, and painted, it's going to look the same. Now, we haven't done any of that yet, but
it's kind of in the pipeline.
It's in the pipeline. And we've had cases like there was a church that was damaged, the spire, and I think it was Hurricane Florence. And it had some metal work up on the spire that was blown off the church, literally, and destroyed. And unfortunately, it could not be remade. It just, no one on the planet made this anymore. Well, they found a place they could do fiberglass to emulate what they had up there. From a distance looking up, it looks like what it was, but that's no longer copper and brass or whatever the original was. Now it's fiberglass. There's various reasons for material change. One is cost. That's another thing. Originally, we're not supposed to look at cost. Now we kind of are. Instead of being, this is a law chiseled in granite, it's like, well, if you have reason, and it's got to be reason to do this, you can do it. And I'll give you an example. Roofs. A lot of homes downtown had slate roofs.
I remember you talking about this. So I took Stephen's historic preservation class at Thalian, and it was phenomenal. I have 7 pages of notes from it, and this was one of the things that I kept writing down.
Now, these roofs, we have kind of figured out by the age of the ones that needed to be replaced, the slate actually lasts around 120 years, which is not bad, but a lot are aging out. So the problem with it, you can still get this slate, but the cost to do a slate roof is absolutely phenomenal. People cannot afford it. You're talking $150,000, God only knows, depending on the size of the house.
Yeah, and these houses aren't small. Like a lot of these houses downtown are gigantic.
Well, I mean, I have a smaller house, and mine is 2,800 square feet. So yes, some of them are much larger than that, 4,000, 5,000 square feet. Something had to be done. So now, basically we're allowing architectural shingles to replace the slate. We don't like to see it because you lose a piece of that history, but again, we didn't used to consider cost, but it comes to the point where you have a choice. You say, oh no, you can't replace the slate, keep the leaks going, rot the house and lose the whole property, or say, okay, you're going to have, you can put a new roof with architectural shingles. Yeah, you have to make these choices. Sometimes it is not a perfect world and you got to do the best you can.
I think that is a really reasonable shift when you talk about we can continue to preserve these properties or we can let them go into disrepair. When it comes to spending $150,000 or having the money to put $150,000 towards a roof, when you're already paying your mortgage and you're already investing in upkeep, that could be something that keeps most people from buying downtown. And then we end up with a ton of properties downtown that are just rotting.
Right. Well, in my class, I usually ask the realtors, do they know what PITI is, P-I-T-I? Which is principal, interest, tax, and insurance, which is a calculation in mortgages when some say, couple is looking to buy a house, can they afford the mortgage? And I joke about it and I call it PITIM. I put an M on the end because with a historic property, it's those things plus the maintenance. You are going to spend money maintaining an historic property. The very elements of it are going to rot or something else will happen and you're going to have to fix them. I did some calculating last year. This was also installing storm windows, so it wasn't totally replacement maintenance, but probably it's in the ballpark of $10,000 a year. So if you don't have money in your back pocket for maintenance, I kind of chide realtors that a couple, I pick on a couple, like I say a young couple, they're not that affluent, but they love the idea of an historic home.
It's the feeling. It's the Bridgerton vibes. It's the dream of owning something historic.
Right. And they've got stars in their eyes. Okay, but I mean, there's got to be a little discussion that, hey, this is not a house that was built last year. You've got maybe a honeymoon period of 15 years without major maintenance. You're probably in a year or two going to face something expensive, even if the house is in good shape when you buy it.
I think about people like my dad or my husband who are very handy, my father-in-law. They can replace a window. They can, paint and fix a deck. But when we're talking about these historic homes, we're talking about pointing up brick and stone. We're talking about foundational, structural issues.
Right.
A
lot.
Old electrical wiring that needs to be replaced. So this isn't just Harry homeowner, I can fix all of these problems. Some you definitely can, but some you are going to need to be putting a significant amount of money in fixing.
And plus the knowledge. Now,
yes.
One of my pluses, I guess you might say, in dealing with my own home is I grew up in homes that were probably older than the home I own now.
Same.
So I know what plaster walls are. I know what this wood is I know how this house is built. Even if you are really good with your hands and you normally fix your own stuff, this is not the stuff you've been fixing. This is something different and you have to understand what you're dealing with.
My brain goes cast iron pipes. It's not just a leak in a sink, it's cast iron and welding.
There could be lead pipe in these homes.
Lead pipe?
Actually on my block, Cape Fear Public Utilities, the block down from me on North 6, they just did a project. Their pipes from the street, they discovered some were lead and they replaced the piping. We're talking properties that have been there for, 150 or whatever years, and the infrastructure, some of it on the street yet. Well, literally the pipes coming into the house that they could be corroded. My neighbor had to replace the entire water line into his house because there's so much rust in the pipe he couldn't get water anymore. On the next street, they had to replace all of the sewer line, which is the responsibility of the property owner, not Cape Fear Public Utilities. And it was old, but this is a pipe. You've seen it. It's about 4-foot length, and there's a collar, and one pipe fits in the other. Well, roots and garbage had gotten in there, broken the pipe, clogged the pipe. $10,000 job, rip up all the pipe and replace it in your driveway.
And I feel like those, for anybody who's like on Instagram or TikTok a lot, those kind of videos pop up on my feed. I don't know if they pop up on yours, where they're pulling snake-like lengths of just roots out of drains.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when roots have been growing in your drains for 50 years, 100 years as they go by.
Yeah, these aren't sealed pipes like PVC where they're glued tight.
All the things that they don't tell you when you're dreaming about your historic home.
A real estate person is a professional. Hopefully they are giving you the information that you should have, but they're not going to want to seem too negative about a property. People also, even if the realtor doesn't listen, and then they buy the house and they find all these issues and problems and they just can't believe this is happening to them.
The exception, not the rule.
Yeah, no, you're not the exception. You are the rule. It will happen.
Speaking of that, one of the things that you hit on in your class was these home inspections for these properties, and the idea that you're going to get like a journal of a home inspection from this property, because there's no possible way that even after an amazing renovation that everything is going to be to code, because it wasn't built that way.
Actually, the home I bought enticed me because in 2005, it was flipped, and the flipper did an extensive job taking out a lot of the old plaster walls. Everything in my home, electric, plumbing, gas lines, code, 2005. That is not easy to find downtown in Wilmington. There's another course I teach, red flags, about what to look for in properties. This is any property, brand new build. You go in and the old expression from politics, lipstick on a pig, they take these homes, they throw a little paint, a little this, and they kind of dress them up and clean them up, and you go in and you think things are wonderful, and they're not. And home inspectors, they have certain things they look for, but they're not going to find everything. I guess if they applied perfect code that they use, not a single historic house would even pass. So when they look at these, I guess they take a certain amount of judgment there too. But again, I mean, be prepared to have some kind of maintenance issue. It's
Absolutely.
just inevitable.
Absolutely. When it comes to landscaping, these beautiful live oak trees, what role does the city play in protecting those?
In the historic district, and this is similar, by the way, to HOAs, because we had the same rule. Now, if you have a property in the city, a single family home property, and you want to cut a tree, a major tree, you can cut a tree. It's on your property. However, if you're in the historic district, you need a permit. What I always tell people when they have questions is run everything through the historic planning office. Call down there, hey, I want to do this. I want to cut this tree. And they will say, okay, well, what is it? What are you doing? And they'll say, yeah, that's not a big deal. Or, well, let me come take a look and see what you need, etc. Because they don't want major trees, especially the live oak, which is sort of like in India, the sacred cow. I mean, those are the sacred cows of Wilmington. So yeah, they try to protect them. So yeah, there are regulations, and major landscapes have to be approved by either bypass with staff or go in front of the commission. We just had the horrible fire at the Greystone, and the irony of that was about maybe 2 years ago, they came in front of the commission with a landscape plan to change a lot of the landscaping, that they had there. And someone, I believe, made a comment about, well, was this the historic landscaping of the Greystone? And it was kind of a humorous because if you saw a picture of the original Greystone when it was built, it had no landscaping. It had a driveway just going through the lawn to the front of the building and grass. So we approve plans. It's not necessarily like, oh, well, this is what they had back in 1890. No, it is a current plan. Now there is, by the way, there is a list. And you can get this list of plant materials from the Historic Preservation Office downtown. I believe the Historic Wilmington Foundation has this list. But these are plants that are kind of quote unquote historical in Wilmington. These are plants that you could have found planted in a garden back in 1870.
I love that.
And
I'll link that in the show notes as well, because I feel like people would love that. So we're going to do a segment called No Dumb Questions. Because any question is allowed. And if you ever have any questions that we don't cover in this, drop a comment and I will make sure to get the answer for you. I might be reaching out to Stephen. We might be doing another podcast as well, only on HOAs. So, no dumb questions. Who patrols preserving Wilmington's history? Is it just you?
No, commissioners don't. Now, obviously, if one of the commissioners is walking down the sidewalk and see a bulldozer approaching a house, something egregious, we'll make a call to the city. Most of this is actually what they call complaint driven. The neighbors call. The neighbors see a big truck pull in front of the neighbor's yard. Suddenly 10 guys get out with sledgehammers and they will call the city. Now, the city's not probably going to be Johnny on the spot, but at some point, you might have a zoning officer show up at the door and say, hey, what's going on here? We've had cases where people have torn off a metal roof and put on a type of metal roof that's not allowed. And they wound up having to tear that roof off and put the correct roof on, which runs a lot of money. So, the bottom line is you can save yourself so much pain and suffering and agony and money or whatever you want to call it. Check first. It's that simple.
If you don't want to check, don't buy a historic house. If you don't want to check, don't buy in an HOA.
Right, exactly.
It comes with the territory.
It's like I always heard in HOAs, well, I didn't agree to this. Well, yes, you did when you signed your deed. And the same way when it's zoning.
Yeah.
You're not in a historic district.
You actually did sign up for it.
Yeah, you did sign up for it. So it's
you really did.
And this is why I wrote this course and teach this course about historic districts. real estate agents, explain to people, look, there are rules to follow. This is not just carte blanche, do whatever you want.
This is stuff you have to know if you are going to be looking at these kinds of homes, which is why we're doing this podcast. No dumb question. It's about the Greystone. What happens when a property like that gets destroyed?
Oh, well, that's still up in the air. Every month, it's like we inquire. It's like, what's going on? What have you heard? What's the buzz? I mean, we don't have a magic link to what's going on. They've been evaluating it. They've been looking at it. It can be rebuilt with a couple things. One, no city, no municipality can force it to be rebuilt when it's damaged like this. What they're, I believe, and this is only my belief, doing is looking at the stone structure. That's limestone, so how badly damaged is it? Now, I witnessed the fire. I walked down there. It's only a couple blocks from my house and watched it. The fire basically was a huge tongue of fire coming out of the center of the building, which sounds weird, was good, in my opinion, because the major heat was in the center going up and they're spraying water like crazy on it. The windows broke and air was being rushed in. So that's why you had that kind of furnace effect, funnel going straight up. I am hoping that carried so much heat up and out, it didn't severely damage the walls. Now, Ben Riegel, I'll use his name, he is our current historic manager downtown. Nice gentleman. If you have questions, give him a call. He worked in Chicago, and they had some brick and masonry structures that had fires up there. And there is a technique where you literally build a house inside of the walls. So instead of depending on the old walls, you would come up with studs and basically do a platform construction within the structure.
Yeah, so the exterior is almost just like a fascia, like just the outside. And then we're building structural engineering inside of it.
Correct. And please God, this time use metal studs. I mean, it's like something that doesn't burn, but I mean, but that's up to the owners of the property, the insurance companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and engineers and architects. Can it be done? I'm hoping it will be done. But again, this is why we have vacant lots downtown. Fires.
And that kind of leads me into my next dumb question, renovating versus restoring. And they are different.
They are quite different, and I bring it up in the course. My house was renovated inside. They went in, they literally tore out the walls. They left the original hardwood floors. They took out many of the walls except where I do have wainscoting, which they left. So I do have lead paint there and all the fun stuff you have with historic homes.
You're going to have to disclose that when you sell.
Yeah. Okay, guys, there's lead paint here. But anyway, but then they went in and they rewired, replumbed, redid everything in the house, which is a renovation. So when you renovate a historic home and you go in there and blow out walls to make great rooms, which is something I always wondered, why do you buy a historic home and do that? Build a new home somewhere. Now that's renovation. Now restoration is a whole nother thing.
Completely different beast.
Completely different and very expensive, by the way. That's where you go in the home. One example, I won't name names, but the wife of a person downtown there bought a home. They had painted the moldings, and that's not wrong. Many moldings are painted in historic homes, but this one originally was not painted, probably shellac or some old material, and took literally a couple years to carefully strip moldings, everything in the house to bring it back to what it was when originally built. That is a restoration. Painstaking, probably expensive.
Very expensive, labors of love to get back to what it was.
Right. So yeah, that gets pricey.
Gets pricey in a hurry. Can you install solar panels on historic homes?
Yes, there are federal laws.
This was new news to me.
Well, okay, this was not a historic home. This was actually a new home on my block with a shingled roof, and it's a highly energy efficient new home with a look that fits in. That was what we approved. And there was some question on that, but yeah. And same with HOAs, by the way. I mean, there are federal laws. The historic district in Wilmington does not live in a bubble. We have to apply state law and we have to apply federal laws. And, the federal government does allow in different circumstances. I mean, there are some regulations, obviously, solar panels. Now, again, I'd be careful. Now, I have an original roof. I have a metal roof from 1896. I could put solar panels up there and power half of my neighborhood. But no, I really don't want to mess with that roof, put holes in it to put panels, and
And the
it's a
weight
choice.
structure, I would think, like the weight of the solar panels on the framing that exists.
Well, that's, I'm glad you brought that point up. We've had some metal roofs that were devastated and destroyed, and the people want to put on shingles. And maybe Mr. Shingle comes to your house and says, well, I can do that roof for $20,000. Well, he's calculating the shingles. You got to understand, like, for example, my own home, when you go up in the attic space and look up, you do not see any kind of plywood sheathing up there. You see 1x4 slats going across about every 6 inches. And then you see metal, which is the actual roof, because that's the way they were built. So with my home, yeah, let's say we rip off that metal roof, which is basically, metal sounds heavy. It's not. It's actually light. So now you say, okay, put on shingles. Well, hold on there. It's not that easy. Now you got to tear off all those 1x4s back to the rafters, and then you have to put on sheathing, tar paper.
It's that additional maintenance. It's not just replacing a roof, it's replacing roof plus.
Plus. Rafters are simple rafters in these homes. They are simply peaked. That's it. Now, you put weight on that. Gravity pushes down. And if you walk around the historic district with a careful eye and look at homes, you'll see some of these 2-story homes that it appears the upper walls are flaring out. Well, they are.
Because of the weight of the roof, it's almost like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich where the jelly starts squeezing out.
It starts squeezing out. Yeah, the jelly's coming out of your windows now. Like what they did with mine, they basically went in the attic, they pulled all the rafters tight, and they put a 2x4 bolted across every rafter up there, so you don't have the spread. You see the dollar signs starting to go higher and higher. And we have people with not badly damaged metal roofs applied to replace them, to do different roofs and all this. Look, we can't tell people if they really believe this and they have evidence, if they have issues, they can't have a new roof, etc. But I always point out, what's the old expression? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And
I'm sure you'll need to pay for something else fixed before you need to replace the roof. Don't let that money burn a hole in your pocket.
No.
So I've got one last big question.
Sure.
And I went into my office and I started talking to everybody about this to see if they'd ever experienced this when they were selling historic homes. And I couldn't find anybody. But you talked to me about it and it is stuck in my brain and I can't let it go. Are you ready?
Go for it.
You were talking about easements when we were in the class. And you were talking about historic easements and how you're always going to end up with a cistern in the backyard or an electrical easement running through somewhere. The houses have just been around for so long.
Right.
We have to be careful about that.
Right.
But then you said that you can get easements
On the inside.
inside your house.
Yeah.
And my mind has been blown ever since, and I just need you to clarify all of that.
Okay, so we aren't the guilty suspects on this one with the Historic Wilmington Commission, Preservation Commission. That's not our thing. However, in Wilmington, like many cities, there's an historic society. We have the Historic Wilmington Foundation. And this is what happens. People buy these homes, especially the ones that do restoration work that's so bloody expensive, but they are gorgeous, they're beautiful. And then they see people buy homes and rip out walls and tear out fireplaces and tear up wood floors and basically destroy these homes.
Paint the original marble, tile, brick fireplaces.
Yeah, do all this stuff. And they get nervous. So they don't know what to do about it. And then somebody says to them, oh, well, you can get an easement on that. So when you sell the property, it's just not completely, they can do whatever they wish. And again, this is not government. Let me stress this. This is not the city. No, this is a nonprofit organization. The Historic Wilmington Foundation. They have probably, I've heard, over 100 easements on the inside of houses, historic homes downtown. And for example, perhaps like my house has 6 fireplaces. Now, I have none on my house, but I could go to them and say, I want an easement that none of the 6 fireplaces can ever be removed, or this or that or whatever. And there's a literal easement, a legal recorded easement on the property. Now, folks, I am a person who, say this gently, I don't know, I'm not super trusting of things. I always like to, like Reagan said, trust and verify.
Trust and verify.
So I, basically look at things and it's like, so you have a title searcher Of course, you're checking out. Now, their main thing is chain of title. That's what they're mainly looking at. And they're trained to basically look through and whatever their method is, and probably they're thinking, oh, is there a driveway easement? Is there a public easement for a gas line? Is this or that? And that's kind of what they're looking at. Well, again, if they're really good, they'll find these because easements are recorded. But is there an easement in the living room, which is probably not in their normal sphere of investigation? Okay, you're listing a home downtown. Again, make phone calls. First of all, by the way, just make a phone call. The lines of historic districts are as jagged as a saw. So one house might be in, one house might be out.
The north side of the street versus the south side of the street.
Exactly. Like the commercial business district overlay downtown, we only go to the south side of Chestnut Street. The north side on, no. This is what you call the historic planning office about. Get the address, find out what district it's in, if it's in a district at all. Then the second call is over the Historic Wilmington Foundation and say, hey, this is the address. Are there any easements? Do you have any easements on the inside of this house? The last thing in the world you want to do as a real estate agent is get a property sold, and then people, the old truck pulls up with the guy with the sledgehammer, and people make phone calls, and suddenly there's a stop work order. Yeah, so just investigate. Know what it is.
So when it comes to the inside easements, and say somebody buys it, they don't understand that they have the inside easements, and then they go to renovate, like say it's the easements on the floors, or is it like a dead stop of work? Like what does the easement control?
Again, that's up to Historic Wilmington Foundation.
Okay.
And of course somebody has to give them wind that this is going on. And like I said, most things are complaint driven. So, perhaps a neighbor sees stuff going on and makes some phone calls.
And the neighbor was best friends with the people who owned the house, and they know all about it.
Sally and John, I know they had an easement.
I know that
look what they're doing. But you don't want somebody showing up at the door saying, hey, here's a stop work. So it's so simple. Just call,
make the
check,
phone calls,
do your homework.
And I'll put a list in the show notes of each one of these organizations and where to find all of the right information. If you ever have any questions while you're looking at houses, you can give me a call, but we will get you all set up and protected.
Look, again, this is a volunteer position. They don't pay me for being on the commission. None of the other commissioners, all 7 of us, nope. But, we are just trying to preserve the historic value of downtown.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this.
Sure.
I've even talked to some professionals that didn't have all of this information. So the idea that you're here to share is 10 out of 10. I really appreciate it.
You are most welcome. Glad to do it. I sometimes I feel like the Blues Brothers in the movie, from God here to try to, preserve these homes and these properties.
Well, we appreciate you so much. If a historic home is on your wish list, I always recommend doing a little homework before actually touring properties. If you'd like help navigating historical districts, preservation rules, and what renovations are actually possible, reach out anytime, and I'd love to help you figure out if a historic home is the right fit for you. Until then, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you around our perfect little city.